sensitive of time, I'm John Kuntz. Good afternoon. Welcome to the May 16th meeting of the Raleigh Appearance Commission. The Commission is charged with providing guidance, advice, recommendations regarding the visual quality and aesthetic characteristics of the City of Raleigh. The members of the Commission are volunteers who are dedicated to the quality of design in Raleigh and represent a varied field of expertise. We will have staff review the staff report prior to the applicant's presentation and identify the administrative alternate findings that the applicant will need to address. For the applicants presenting this cases this afternoon, we ask that you take no more than 10 minutes to present your case. When you arrive at the podium, please state your name and address for the record. That also includes any members of the public who are here for comment. Once you present your case, including all the required items, the Commission may ask you questions regarding your case, and then we'll table it for further discussion. Yet we may reserve time for you to come back up and answer some additional questions. After said discussion, the Commission will set forth a decision and recommend approval with conditions, recommend denial, or defer the case, in which the applicant has 21 days to rework the requested items and represent, and any decision needs to be tied back to the alternate findings. Our recommendation will then go to the planning director for a final determination. And as a reminder, it's not our charge to determine if the applicant can meet the code. They're coming to us to ask for an alternate solution. We are charged with determining if they meet the alternate findings. So today we have two AD cases. The first one is the Hillsborough Street project, second one is St. Mary's. Allison, you got the first one, you got the second one, okay. Let's start with AAD, what is this one? There's 301 Hillsborough Street. I don't have an AAD number on mine. Is what? 1019, okay. AD 1019, 301 Hillsborough Street. We'll get Allison to discuss the nature of the case, and we'll have the applicant come up again.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to recuse myself from this one.
Yeah, thank you.
AAD 1019, 301 Hillsborough Street. The applicant is requesting administrative alternates for UDO section 1.5.6 build to, 1.5.9 transparency, and 3.3 building massing. So I will try to rush through this, but you're going to hear a lot of my voice. UDO 1.5.6 is build to is defined as the area on a lot where a certain percentage of the front principal building facade must be located, measured as a minimum and maximum setback range from the edge of the proposed or existing right-of-way, whichever is greater. The required percentage specifies the amount of the front building facade that must be located in the build to, measured based on the width of the building divided by the width of the site or lot. The intent of the section is to provide a range for building placement that strengthens the street edge along the right-of-way, establishing a sense of enclosure by providing spatial definition adjacent to the street. The building edge can be supplemented by architectural elements and certain tree plantings aligned in a formal rhythm. The harmonious placement of buildings to establish the street edge is a principal means by which the character of an area or district is defined. The build-to range is established to accommodate some flexibility in specific site design while maintaining the established street edge. The requirements are that on a corner lot, a building facade must be placed within the build-to for the first 30 feet along the street extending from the block corner. With the exception of parking areas, all structures and uses customarily allowed on the lot are permitted in the build-to area. Any common area is not required to meet the build-to requirements. 4 doesn't apply. So this applicant is proposing to develop a 20-story mixed-use building within a downtown mixed-use 20-story shopfront frontage. The project consists of hotel, office, and residential uses, above ground floor retail, and a multi-level parking deck. Since the building is in a shopfront frontage district, the primary street build-to is 80% of the lot width, while the build-to for the side streets is 40%. On both primary and side streets, the build-to range is 0 to 15 feet. The project has frontage on 4 public streets: Hillsborough Street, which is the primary, South Dawson, West Morgan, and South Harrington. The applicant requests an administrative alternate for build-to on the northwest corner along Hillsborough Street and the northeast corner. In lieu of meeting the build-to requirement, the applicant provides plazas such as amenity areas which feature active uses and landscaping. So it's not the width, it's the frontage. The intent, the build-to must meet the alternate findings. The UDO lists these findings as the approved alternate meets the intent of the build-to regulations. The approved alternate conforms with the comprehensive plan and adopted city plans, and the approved alternate does not substantially negatively alter the character-defining street wall or establish a build-to pattern that is not harmonious with the existing built context. The change in percentage of building that occupies the build to area or increased setback does not negatively impact pedestrian access, comfort, or safety, and site area that would have otherwise been occupied by buildings is converted to an outdoor amenity area under section 1.5.3b, which is right before this. Okay. And now for UDO section 1.5.9 transparency. The intent of the transparency requirements are intended to lend visual interest to street-facing building facades for both pedestrians and building occupants and minimize blank wall area. This is not applicable to residential uses. The requirements of the transparency section are that the minimum percentage of windows and doors that must cover a ground story facade is measured between 0 and 12 feet above the adjacent sidewalk. More than 50% of the required transparency must be located between 3 and 8 feet of the building facade. The minimum percentage of windows and doors that must cover an upper story facade is measured from the top of the finished floor to the top of the finished floor above. Where there is no floor above, upper story transparency is measured from the top of the finished floor to the top of the wall plate. In a mixed-use building or a general building where an urban frontage is applied, a minimum of 60% of the street-facing, street-level window pane surface area must allow views into the ground story for a depth of at least 8 feet. Windows shall not be made opaque by non-operable window treatments, and glass shall be considered transparent where it has a transparency higher than 80% and an external reflectance of less than 15%. Glass on upper stories may have any level of transparency and external reflectance. UDO section 3.2.6 for the mixed-use building type requires a minimum of 66% transparency for ground store buildings fronting this case. The proposed project has frontage on 4 public streets, as we discussed. According to the applicant, minimum ground floor transparency will be provided on the ground floor of all facades except West Morgan Street, which has 37% transparency proposed. To compensate for the reduction in transparency and create visual interest, the applicant has provided artistic treatments on the facade in question. The findings that this
You can jump to building massing.
Okay. All right, the intent of building massing is to manage the impact of tall buildings located near the public right-of-way. Stepbacks are intended to provide access to light and air at street level, mitigate wind impacts, provide a consistent street wall, and visually reduce the perceived scale of a building to avoid a canyon effect. This building, because it's between 13 to 20 stories, it's a required 15-foot step back between the 3rd and 7th stories. So this will be for all public streets, essentially all sides of this building. So along Hillsborough Street, the building provides an approximately 10 to 11-foot step back for most of the building's frontage at the floor level labeled. The step back for the office tower on the eastern portion of the site occurs at level C9. This might be better absorbed when the applicant makes their presentation, but along West Morgan Street, portions of the building are step back from the lower building facade while maintaining portions that have no step back. They occur at level C9, 92 feet as well. And these stepbacks are in a height range that is similar to the maximum height permitted for a 7-story building. No stepbacks are proposed along South Dawson Street, although it appears there is a small setback for the entire building along that street at the ground level. For South Harrington Street, no building stepback is indicated, but the building is set back significantly from the street. Plans show these setback areas include outdoor amenity areas. In lieu of meeting the step back requirements, the applicant proposes setbacks from the street on South Harrington Street. It should be noted that portions of the building above the podium level are completely open. Any questions?
Any questions for Allison before we have the applicant come to present again? And just for those in the audience for public comment, we'll give you a turn at the podium after the applicant presents. Any questions for Allison on AAD 1019? All right, the applicant, please come forward to present your case. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Richard Martini, the Fallon Company, on behalf of the owner. I just want to tell you that we're glad to be back before you. We had the informal meetings a couple of times, which was very helpful for us, and we hope we've addressed all of the questions and comments that came up. So I'm going to let Tehran Duda go through that, and then happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Yep. And what I'll caution you on, I know we've done this a few times, is I know we have a hard stop at 6 today, so I want to be sensitive of time for everybody. Maybe focus mostly on the 3 alternates you're requesting versus the historic perspective, which I do appreciate, but that might be more helpful today. Where you need to, obviously.
Sure. Let me come up here. Where's my advance? Well, I have been back here before a couple times, and you've seen the logic behind all this. Right. Is there anyone new here on this committee?
There's one new one, yeah. I'm brand new.
So I'm going to go very quickly through the concept and how we got here. 4 districts that all come together on the site, spectacular location for us to think about how these buildings can respond to that. The 4 different districts and how they inform our building, inform even the massing. You can see this is a massing that would be following the guidelines. Big super block, stepping back. So what we did is we actually said, this would not make for great cities, but how could we take that block and break it up to create massings that would break down the scale, would still hold the street edge, would ease the buildings back in such a way that it makes for a composition of 3 buildings that makes it feel like it's part of this context, but at the same time doesn't create street walls. That's one of the biggest goals I think you have of not creating a monolithic block for a project of this size. I'll take you around the building. We even thought about how we address each of these elevations, and particularly the corners, and how each of these corners, I think great cities and buildings in great cities have great corners where it's active, full of life and activity. You can see each one of these, how we're going to change the coloration of the cladding that we have on the buildings, and where those buildings actually come and meet the street and where they're set back to break up the scale and clearly make it 3 independent buildings as opposed to a super block. We like to go through this kind of analysis every project we do, looking at water tables of heights of adjacent buildings, how those might inform us when we start to look at these elevations. You can see even on a very large parking structure like this, how we've broken it down into segments and into moments along that elevation. So it doesn't feel like one monotonous elevation, but rather it feels like a series of smaller buildings composing that elevation. You can see the elevation of the east elevation of the office building with this even double expression that we have on that. A high canopy where the main entrance of the building will be. And then how, as we slope down along the street edge, and how we would change the openings in this particular elevation, and even think about how we might introduce art in this elevation, which is going to be housing most of our services. Thought about the street a great deal. Clearly where we have openings into parking decks and parking loading docks. We want to even think about how with the roll-down screens we have there might have some element of art. How we compose this elevation, which is this is the only elevation that does not meet the transparency. Obviously this is where all our services are. But if we can compose this in an artistic way to address kind of the arts district that's right next door, I think it'll be a wonderful addition to the street. This is the west elevation. This is where the flying saucer meets our project. That would make a great title for a book, actually. The flying saucer meets our project. We want the scale of the flying saucer and what we do next to it to have a sympathetic relationship. So that's why we pulled back that area to create the outdoor plaza. The corner of our major office building, and we've elevated that canopy fairly high here because we want to see the space underneath it occupied. This is the side, that corner that will be facing the new Civic Center. We understand there's going to be a lot of arts related in that area as well. So we want to make sure that we feed into that and address that in a meaningful way. The ground floor, you've seen this before, where we have entrances and exits into our loading dock and our garage. We do want to create the sense of continuity of the sidewalk, so how we treat the sidewalk in such a way that you don't sense the large openings that we have on that side. You can see where we have pulled back and created the outdoor space, our open space along here, and even how we've gone to great lengths here to set back our glass line of our lobby, again, to make this as open, inviting, and broad a sidewalk as we can, even though the building above it meets the street. 3 corners. Corner of the office building, we imagine a cafe or restaurant in this corner, outdoor seating and dining. Be fantastic, I think, one of those great places along Hillsborough Street that you're going to want to come to in the evening. Corner of Dawson and Morgan, similar kind of relationship. We actually have an opportunity for a little terrace there and outdoor seating. And then finally, on Hillsborough and Harrington, this is where we set back with the flying saucer next door. Outdoor seating, a lot of grade change between the elevation of the restaurant and the street and the sidewalk. So we'd like to do some terracing, landscaping, seating, really make this feel like an active corner that will be facing the future Civic Center corner. There was a question about headlights, garages. We've now had lots of experience with this. You can see where we're placing the solid portion of our perforated metal panels to hide the headlights. Similarly, where we have the precast, same thing, we're going to hide the headlights here. We're even looking at ways in which we can take the internal lighting that we have for the garage itself and have that lighting masked around the perimeter so that we won't be seeing those lights from the outside. You can see here the demising line between the phases. Phase 1 on the right with its outdoor terrace. In phase 1, we'll be keeping the existing buildings and the parking lot here. And how we need the projects to operate independently, so you can see how the parking deck here has access here, loading docks, and all the back of house and transformers and all the mechanical rooms that you need on the ground floor. We're also providing a way of getting in for bicycles. So there's actually a bicycle storage in the center of the project right here. And then on the side, on this side, as a temporary measure before the second phase of the project is completed, this side facing the garage, I know a question was asked how we would be treating that. Our proposal is to do fabric panels that would be hung from here. So there's a whole series of fabric panels, essentially hiding the deck behind it. And we're thinking we might introduce some pattern or artistic expression to that. If you know the Dillon building, we took that artist and created this wonderful work of art there. Here, as a temporary measure, I think we want to look at what kind of pattern or decorative element we would add to this. And I'm going to ask Jane to give you a quick overview of the 3 issues.
So I'll try to keep this very brief. For the 3 alternate amendments, the first one is Build 2. And as Sharon has already introduced, we are making tremendous efforts to enlarge and create active outdoor amenity areas and really giving that space back to the public realm. So those are exactly where we are not meeting the Build 2 requirements on this northern corner, as well as in the lobby area along Dawson Street. And here's a graphic showing how the outdoor amenity areas overlay on that Build 2 line. For transparency transparency, as Sharon mentioned and Allison mentioned as well, we are meeting the transparency requirements on 3 sides. I'm quickly flipping through those here. And then on Morgan Street, where we are not meeting that requirement, we're at 37%. We're fully transparent on the corners of the property for retail space as well as the residential entry area. And then in that inner part of Morgan Street, that is our utilitarian front where we have our loading docks and parking access. For that, knowing that we need that space somewhere, and we're trying to maintain as transparent of a project on all of the other major streets that we're on, Hillsborough especially, as well as Dawson with as busy as that is. We've grouped this here, and then we are, as Teron mentioned earlier, trying to beautify that as an art feature, whether that is through a screening or a painted treatment on there, trying to create a more of a mural-esque look, while it also is a very utilitarian front for the project. It's the workhorse phase of our project. Third is building massing, and as Allison also introduced, we have several step-back areas along the top of our parking deck. That's where our amenity deck is located. For phase 1, we have a very large amenity deck off of the office tower, as well as some spaces off of both residential and hotel towers. We're respecting that 10 to 15 foot setback on both Hillsborough and portions of Morgan Street. And then what we've done on Dawson Street is pull the entire building from the build-to line, creating more of a setback environment along Dawson Street. There you can also see if we had transposed a line of where that step back line would be, we're referencing that in the lobby glass as we pull back more along the pedestrian space. Again, adding to the pedestrian realm as best we can. Just a quick comparison of what the UDO compliant code would give you to where we have modified that to truly try to create a holistic project. And then here is a quick datum kind of overlay that references the UDO code of, between a 3 and 7 story building with our ground story treatments of canopies. We're picking up on where that 3-story datum line would be transposed, as well as where the top of the deck would sit for that step back requirement. And then again, just emphasizing that where we are pulling back along Dawson Street, we're giving back that area to the outdoor amenity space and the pedestrian realm, improving the pedestrian experience. So if you have any questions, that's a very quick synopsis. We can go into more detail if you need.
Thank you. From the commission, any questions for the applicants? You want to drill down on something or further clarification on what you presented today or for the past few weeks?
I just had a question.
Yeah.
The art on the service side, is that on garage doors? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so what we're showing here is the loading dock doors. And the idea is that we could, whether it's a screen print or a perforated pattern, do something there to aesthetically improve it.
Are those proposed or are those obviously not existing yet, but that's what you want to do
How
there?
long is it? I believe that it's something that we all are excited by. I think that we would still want to verify it with the owners, but generally we would like to reference some of the city concepts, whether it's a skyline image or something else that is part of Raleigh.
Any other questions for the applicant? Good. All right. Anybody from the public would like to speak on this project? All right. And name and address for the record.
Absolutely. Good
Thank you.
afternoon. My name is Chris Mutos. I live at 317 West Morgan Street. I am president of the Dawson Morgan condos, which are on West Morgan Street. I'm also here representing my company. We own Taverna Agora on the other side of this project on Hillsborough as well. Just as a side note, I have tried to reach out to Fallon on many occasions and haven't received a phone call just to find out where in the process they were and to try to possibly coordinate and have discussion about this project. My concern to date stems from the West Morgan Street side. I feel like there's been a lack of concern and diligence on behalf of the various departments probably within the City of Raleigh, as well as consideration from the developer here based on the existing conditions on the ground. Essentially, from what I can gather from looking at these plans, we have our only entry to our property where they are proposing their parking garage entry as well, causing, in my opinion, what is already a very difficult situation to the residents and to the commercial units there getting in and out of that garage. This is going to add more. Their loading dock is also on the other end of our loading dock, causing another bit of consternation and concern on our end as well. I'm not exactly sure what that would look like in a transportation manner, but I feel as though if we have any large trucks that need to access these garages, that there would be traffic stops and traffic blockages. The transparency is a huge concern. It appears that we're basically, I'm just going to be very blunt about it, we're like the bastard child of the project. Although we're very happy about this project and its concept, there's a portion of it, and it's the West Morgan Street side, that is completely utilitarian. And it faces a residential building, and it will be similar to looking out at a wall, and a very unattractive wall. Regardless of the artwork that is placed, I think that is a great effort, and I think that the murals and all of that are excellent ideas, but the lack of transparency on the streetscape, it's not congregational. I think I can go through the comprehensive plan guidance that is in the UDO and pull out examples of where that particular elevation fails miserably in those ideas and in those guidelines. And I know this is more than just an appearance commission discussion, but I wanted to bring those discussions to light today so that you could understand those concerns from our end as well.
I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan McQuaid, also at the Dawson, apartment 501. I'm on the top floor on the west side of the building. I'd like to reiterate a lot of what Chris has spoken about, and very excited about the building going up. I think I'm from Boston. You guys do a great job. The seaport is absolutely beautiful. I'm very happy with 75% of the design. The 25% is the lack, what's going on to the residential neighbors, the only residential neighbors for this project. There's been a lot of concern for the temporary visitors that would be coming in through the hotel, and also the guests that will be showing up on the three corners. I thought was excellent. If I can go back and find it here, we have, I can't, hopefully I can find it, but it's basically a 92-foot high billboard of concrete and corrugated steel that we're going to be looking at. Where is it? It's coming up. Well, maybe I can find it. Here it is. It's that orange piece on.
You're looking for Morgan
Can
here.
you just find that? I just want to see that orange. Yeah. Okay. When we look at the 92, or I think it's 82-foot elevation that we are seeing of corrugated and concrete, when I look at the fabric that was given consideration to the other facades, that why aren't we being considered for that as well? I understand that we have to have the operational side of the complex someplace in the building. I get it. I do not like the lack of the setback that we should have there. I want that sidewalk and to be welcoming, not only to people on the street, but also to us. You know, that we want to feel part of the neighborhood. What's going to happen here is we're going to be part of an industrial dust bed. We're the support system. We're going to have 20-footer and 40-foot trucks along with 10 8-foot cabs that are going to be backing into there on a 40 to 50-foot road, which is going to be a significant issue on a two-way street. There's no way for that truck to be able to back in there. I like the idea of the design on the garage doors, but those garage doors are going to be open most of the day. Right? We'll see them down at night. I look at the building there on the corner of Morgan and Dawson. I love the aesthetics of it. I just don't think it continued. And it's one of the largest billboards at 92 feet that we're going to see of just garage elements. I think there has to be more consideration with the setback and also the design elements that are going to exist on this. And I would hope you take that into that consideration, because we all have terraces that we're sitting on. You know, we enjoy it, we enjoy the city views. We understand that once we get above 92 feet, we're looking up, it's going to look beautiful. But most of our building is going to look straight out of our windows, out of our living rooms, out of our bedrooms, and out of our terrace. We're looking at a parking garage. And when we looked at the other architectural design that was done on the Dillon Apartments, again, with no residential neighbors appearing on any area of it, personally, I don't think that design is aesthetic enough. It's great for an industrial site, which that is an industrial character site, correct? But we need to have greater consideration, you know, for a residential neighborhood that we are part of. And we're the only neighbors that are residential, and I hope you consider that, and I hope we'll be able to have discussions. I hope that Fallon will communicate with us. We would love to have that discussion, be part of it, that we can make this one of the most beautiful buildings in downtown Raleigh. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment for 301 AD 1019? Well, we'll say thank you for your comments. And we're in the same block right there. I would encourage, you know, somebody reach out to Brian or someone to sit down and have some further discussion about, you know, what that transparency could look like on the ground floor level and any other aspects. I mean, we're in the same room here. I think that's a discussion that can absolutely be ushered along. So I appreciate you coming tonight to voice that. Any other public comment? All right, let's table it for discussion amongst the commission, and we'll go through these findings. I don't think I need to go through too much of the conversation, the history about how we've gotten here over the two courtesy reviews we've had today. I think it's from what was demonstrated, you know, a month or so ago to what we're seeing now. In the areas that where we are looking and we're tasked to look, I think they're greatly improved. And I'm on board with the majority of without micromanaging or really redesigning it, I'm on board with a lot of the efforts that are manifested in what's presented again today in our packets. That's kind of my lead thought, that we've come a long way and did really a fantastic project. Any other thoughts?
I guess I would just like to, just on the last person who commented, we did talk about that facade and how important that facade is to the neighbors next door. So maybe one of our recommendations, if we do approve it, is to maybe look at that a little bit further and see if there's anything else that we can do for the neighbors, because we did discuss it.
Thoughts, Martha, Corey, anybody?
Oh, I'll second your thoughts as well. I think with the two previous courtesy reviews, I think we've come a long way. I think there are a lot of great elements to this building, and you know, phase one is not a lot different than One Glenwood or something along the same street, Morgan Street, where it has the service areas. This will be a little bit bigger in phase two, of course. It is a rather long facade. I do like the fact that they put a lot of thought and effort into the corners, which help to activate those street edges, probably better than any other location I can think of in the city of Raleigh, which is, I think phenomenal. So I think, that goes a long way to a lot of these, all three of these in question, these findings today in question. So I appreciate the work that they've done towards that. I'll also second that we did put a lot of discussion into this side. This has been a lot of the discussion between this and just the phasing and what it would look like on that facade until phase 2 happens. And I feel like, without knowing exactly what that is, I think that has come a long way, but, maybe there is a little bit more conversation that could be had there, but I think we've pulled, a lot closer than where we started. So, just my preliminary thoughts.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that I think the project's beautiful. I think the way that the massing, really, to what you were saying, is a definite improvement on what the UDO would require. The outdoor spaces at the corners, I think, are wonderful. Great addition to the city. So I think it's a beautiful addition to Raleigh. It will be.
And overall, really, in my book, it's your transparency question. I think the Bill 2 is something that we can readily get around. I say get around, that I can really approve or get behind. And in the building mass, when there's an opening there, I think you look at the intent of all this stuff, I think they've gone above and beyond what the intent prescribes. The transparency is less glowing of a clearance, for lack of a better word. But I think it's obviously a lot better, but that's not what the public wants to hear. It's a lot better than what it was. But I do think there could potentially be some meat on the bone after this meeting and some collaboration between the public and the developer to see what further they can do. And I'm comfortable saying that on this occasion because I believe in the good faith efforts that Fallon has done, the developer has done over the past few months in reaching out to most neighbors. Although you didn't get a call potentially, but there's a lot that I know they have reached out to the law school and others in the community to reach out and try to be good neighbors. And they've come down here without required tenants to present this and have really demonstrated an interest in being a good neighbor here in the community. So I don't put that out there with every applicant, but in this one I'm prepared to do and prepared to really get behind improving the transparency today with the good faith will that these guys will continue to work on exemplary project. Why would you go this long and this far without checking the box or last 5%? A good developer doesn't do that. So that's what I'm hoping will proceed. And I know it's been a lengthy process to date. But those are my kind of overall thoughts today. And I think this thing will do great. It's a great location. It's a lot of effort and money's been put to this to date. But I still think this evolves from today, as this comes out. So that's where my thoughts are. And I'm prepared to begin to go through these findings unless somebody else has some other thoughts on it.
I'll just add that maybe as a part of the building massing, since the building massing doesn't meet the requirements on the Morgan Street side, maybe that's kind of how we can help alleviate that issue, is have some additional aesthetic treatments that might make the people across the street less, feeling like they're looking at a bare wall. But
talk more about that on the building massing for Morgan Street.
Mm-hmm. If I'm looking at this right, in these two diagrams, there's two pieces that come all the way to the edge here, where normally they would have to be stepped back. I was just thinking that in lieu of having that step back, maybe we can ask for kind of an additional aesthetic treatment where the parking garage is.
On the parking garage?
Mm-hmm. Or wherever is desired by the people across the street. Just a thought.
The center chunk of parking garage on the Morgan side, is that concrete? Is that facade concrete?
Yes,
It is.
the concrete is in this zone here as well as this
Right.
zone.
And if I understand correctly, you all are concerned about those portions of the parking garage.
Exactly. Aesthetically, and those are above our building, that goes all the way above our building. And just for one clarification, this is the first time we've ever had any communication with them in our entire building.
Do you want to get more prescriptive on that Morgan Street parking deck? Martha?
I don't know that getting prescriptive with, detailed treatments would be helpful, but, just kind of in the same vein as what everybody said before, just kind of taking another step to look at the screening for the parking deck. If we're just kind of shepherding that process, I think that's fine too, but as long as we know that some communication.
Well, I'm all for ushering a conversation, as we've discussed today, and I'm here and found absolutely, before you guys leave today, I'd like to connect the two of you, and either you meet today or another time to further talk about, other best practices that could potentially be explored to alleviate some of the concerns, which I think would be helpful, as you said you would, and they had just said it.
We would love that to be
Yep.
where it happens. So to speak.
Yeah, well, they're right here, so before you guys leave, let's meet out there, and if I need to come referee, I'll be happy to.
Okay.
Okay, all right? Yeah, okay. I'm prepared to go through these findings. Anybody else? Unless anyone else has more comments?
John, did you have a certain order you wanted to go through?
I was gonna just go Bill 2, and then go transparency, then go, all of them, just click them, we'll vote on them as we go. Let's go to Bill 2, page 3 of the packet. The approved alter meets the intent of Bill 2 regulations. I think they do, especially with the spatial treatments in the amenity areas we've discussed. Anybody think they do not? The approved alternate conforms to the comprehensive plan, the adopted city plans, and I'll point to LU 2.1, UD 2.1, UD 4.1, DT 1.6, which we don't talk about very much, and policy DT 7.5. The approved alternate does not substantially negatively alter the character defining street wall or establish a built-to pattern that is not harmonious with the existing built context. I agree with that. Anybody else? Or the change in percentage of building that occupies the built-to area or increased setback does not negatively impact pedestrian access, comfort, or safety. I think it improves it. And finally, 5, the site area that would otherwise have been occupied by buildings is converted to an outdoor amenity area under section 1.53B, which it does, in fact. So I'll go ahead and vote on the built-tos. Is there a motion to approve the built-to?
Motion to approve.
All in favor? Aye. All right, let's go to transparency. We have 3 findings. The approved alternate meets the intent of the transparency requirements. They're intended to lend visual interest to street-facing building facades for both pedestrians and building occupants and minimize blank wall areas, not applicable to residential uses. I'm saying it does, with visual interest. 2, the approved alternate conforms to comprehensive plan and adopted city plans. Let's see, UD 1.2, DT 2.23. Anybody else? UD 3.11. Finally, 3, the street-facing building facade utilizes other architectural treatments to create visual interest to offset the reduction in transparency. And they've showcased some good ideas that are used elsewhere in downtown Raleigh that does that. Especially if they continue to work with the neighbors, which I think is imperative. There's always value in that. Is there a motion to approve the transparency findings?
Do we want to add anything
Yeah,
to
based on
that?
discussions with the developer and owner.
We could, motion approved with, what's your condition? The immediate,
That meeting happens.
yeah, they meet, yeah. I don't think we have to prescribe what
What
happens it, but we'll behold them to, they need to meet with these two. All right, is that a condition, is that a conditional?
I really don't think that's something that you can
That's what I was getting
put
at.
a condition on. It's really enforceable by staff. You know,
So it's a staff enforceable condition, so they really can't condition it upon that.
Yeah, it's something that's something we can really measure as a review staff.
You can measure by saying, did you meet with a neighbor?
I mean, I think what you're proposing something like, can you do this beyond the?
Yeah, okay, however you want, yeah, so we need.
More of a suggestion, I would say.
Well, we suggested a couple times, I know they'll do it, so we'll
Unless
just,
there's something you want to tie to the recommendation for approval.
we're not that far
and-
along.
and-
Yeah, okay. So we'll go back to a straight motion to approve that without condition. I believe it. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Building massing. The approved alternate meets the intent of the building massing regulations. The intent, again, manage the impact of tall buildings located near a public right-of-way, provide access to light and air. I mean, there portions of the building above the podium are completely open, so I do think it does that for wind and light. Are we in agreement there? The approved alternate conforms to comprehend and the adopted city plans. I have not gone through those as I have the other ones, so I need some help on this one.
Policy ED 1.2, architectural features. LU 5.1, reinforcing the urban pattern.
UD 1.3, creating attractive facades.
Yeah, 2.1, placemaking.
UD 6.1, pedestrian uses.
DT 1.2.
UD 4.5.
All right, and 2, the approved alternate conform, we just did that. Number 3, the approved alternate uses a change in building materials to mimic a change in wall plane. The most substantial and durable building materials are located at the bottom floors of the building. We went through that a couple of weeks ago, and they did a great job of that. 4, the approved alternate proposes a building setback behind the sidewalk in lieu of required step back. Resulting open space includes public amenities such as seating areas, trees, and landscaping, outdoor dining, which they've clearly, they've gone overboard there. It's outstanding. And 5, the building contains architectural treatment for delineating the base, middle, and top of the building, which they've done as well, I believe, unless there's somebody else has any other second thoughts on that. Is there a motion to approve the building massing?
I'll motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We don't need to go through those approvals again, do we, Carter? That takes care of all 3?
Yeah.
So we're good. Thank you for all your efforts in coming out here over the past couple of months. Thank you for coming to speak. And Brian, can you get up with them before you guys leave to get that going? Thank you very much. All right, second alternate today. AD 1119, 601 St. Mary Street.
I'm gonna have to recuse myself, Mr. Chair.
I'm gonna go.
Have more detailed recommendations. Gets into the weeds a little bit with materiality and budget and everything. I would have liked to see something more specific.
I don't know, yeah, because I feel like after us, they can kind of just go out and do whatever they want.
Right.
Where do you want to start?
Yeah.
Based on those illustrations. Can we also, do we have an authority to ask for them to put more street trees than required to buffer from, I was just thinking, like, if you can't do something to the wall
Yeah.
itself, can you at least put some more trees so that these neighbors are looking at trees instead of parking garage?
Yeah, I think that's definitely on the table, as long as it's like, if they're not making something, we can require them to do something extra.
Yeah.
With that or whatever.
You get just extra,
Kind of create
Yeah.
extra because.
Right.
kind of clear it
Yeah.
off. So if you want to.
That's what growth, you know?
Yeah, or you just go page down. So you can make
Yeah.
points.
Yeah.
It's as big as you're gonna get. They got a monitor right there. Okay.
Thank you.
We did a good job on that one. Pretty streamlined. For how messy we used to be on those big ones. All right, AD 1119, this you.
This
Yeah,
is
look at
me.
you guys.
We switched.
Yeah, perfect, thank you.
Is everybody back and ready? Oh,
Carrie's gone, right? And Corey's recused.
correct. Okay. So this is for AAD 1119, 601 St. Mary's Street. This is for UDO Section 1.5.6 Build To. The Build To is defined as the area on the lot where a certain percentage of the front principal building facade must be located, measured as a minimum and maximum setback range from the edge of the proposed or existing right-of-way, whichever is greater. The required percentage specifies the amount of the front building facade that must be located in the Build To, measured based on the width of the building divided by the width of the site or lot. The intent of the Build To is intended to provide a range for building placement that strengthens the street edge along the right-of-way, establishing a sense of enclosure by providing spatial definition adjacent to the street. The building edge can be supplemented by architectural elements and certain tree plantings aligned in a formal rhythm. The harmonious placement of buildings to establish the street edge is a principal means by which the character of an area or district is defined. The Build-To range is established to accommodate some flexibility in specific site design while maintaining the established street edge. And if it's all right with you, I'm going to skip, since we've already done a Build-To.
Yeah.
The applicant is proposing to construct an addition to an existing office building on a .79 acre site. The proposed property is zoned office mixed use, 3 stories, green frontage with a neighborhood conservation overlay district. As the property is zoned green frontage, any buildings are required to be placed in a 20-foot to 50-foot build-to range along public streets, with a 50% building width standard for primary streets and a 35% for side streets. The section relevant to this case is 3.4.2 C.3.A.3, which regulates additions on the side of existing buildings. This section of the code states, non-street side additions are allowed where the side addition is at least as close to the build-to as the existing building because the extension increases the width of the building and does not set back any further than the existing building. The applicant intends to build an addition on the side of the building along West Johnson Street. As its closest point to St. Mary's Street, at its closest point, the existing building is located 88.8 feet from the primary street right-of-way. The addition will be aligned with the dominant facade of the existing building facade, but will be a few feet further from the right-of-way than 88.8 feet to accommodate amenity areas and parking. The planned addition includes an extended amenity area within the build-to range. The applicant requests an alternate to align the proposed building addition behind the closest point of the building to the street. The findings to be met for this case are that the approved alternate meets the intent of the build-to regulations. The approved alternate conforms with the comprehensive plan and adopted city plans. The approved alternate does not substantially negatively alter the character-defining street wall or establish a build-to pattern that is not harmonious with the existing build context. The change in percentage of building that occupies the build-to area or increased setbacks does not negatively impact pedestrian access, comfort, or safety, and that site area that would otherwise have been occupied by building is converted to outdoor amenity area. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Lee? I'm hoping to get a better understanding of, of the, it's a little bit confusing with that, the addition thing, which I'm not sure we've seen before. So yeah, if there's no questions, what's that?
It's a very specific subset.
Yeah, right. So if there's any questions for Lee, if not, we'll get the applicant to come and present.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Roselli. I'm an architect with New City Design Group representing the owner. I think what we have here is a fairly simple request for a little relief for this one requirement, alignment of the addition with the forwardmost face of the building. And I think the contention that we have is that we're trying to make a more appropriate architectural response where the dominant facade of the addition aligns with the dominant facade of the existing building. And we'll sort of scroll through this to attempt to illustrate that. Simply, the portion of the building closest to Boyle on the primary street is, we contend, a secondary element to the building, really just a small bay with a lower roof line than the rest of the building. Our intent was to align the dominant face of the addition with the dominant face of the existing building, thinking that was in keeping with the requirements of the UDO. To the letter, it does not comply. The graphics that we're using here to illustrate is to show on the lower right here, this closest point to the street is this secondary bay, we would say. The primary portion of the building, the taller element with the larger facade, is behind that, and the intent of our addition is to align that in sort of height and appearance. You may see better here. The addition does have a bay of its own. It projects from the face of the building. As cantilever, it approaches that furthest most point, but again, I think the architectural response, the intent is that we are meeting the intent of the requirement. The addition extends the current street face of the building. It is an appropriate response for the conditions that we have with an existing building and an addition. The additions have to be equal to or forward of the existing building, and we have a minor deviation, looking for some latitude.
So where are we non-compliant here? Is it the lower balcony,
So the code requires that the new addition meets the closest point of the build-to, and so the technicality here is that the closest point on this building is that bay that pops out, and so they're requesting that the dominant face, rather than the closest face, be
the new established
the
build-to?
alignment.
Yeah,
of the
okay.
street edge.
So it's really the secondary bay that's not compliant. Is that right?
The secondary bay, I think the secondary bay, sorry, on the existing building or the addition?
They're aligned with that one, not this one. Oh, okay,
So
okay.
I believe,
I'm
correct
with
me if I'm wrong, but both bays, the bay of the existing building and the bay of the new building are both at 88.8 feet.
I would say that is not correct.
Not correct, okay, good to know.
So we're talking about a bay window.
Yeah, it's the closest point
Okay, I
to
got you.
the
I'm
primary
with- I
street.
was reading the opposite. I was reading flip, okay.
And the reason why you're not aligning is because there's an existing parking lot there, or?
I think
What's
it
the
may
hardship
be,
to
it may be a
not- yeah.
functional issue. I think the secondary bay of the existing building may project 6 feet from the building, we'll say, plus or minus. We're hanging this whole piece of structure above ground so that we can have circulation and amenity space below. The 6-foot cantilever was a little ambitious. We've got something a little less than that. But really, I think the discussions we've had with staff on it, the primary contention was that the face of this building had to come forward to match the small bay that's forward most on the existing building.
If you're compliant, it would be matched up against the forward side of the secondary bay, as opposed to the dominant face where the secondary bay is attached to. Okay, I'm with you now.
Okay, thank you.
That's not approval, I'm just understanding.
I know there will be some discussion.
Yeah.
But we understand.
Okay. I had read that, in reverse, okay.
But as long as you meet that, what is existing, that face, you meet the intention. You don't have to meet the typical build too of that.
Correct. For side additions, it just has to meet the existing facade.
Yeah, it was in addition to the code, we recognize that there are existing buildings that don't comply.
Right.
And as opposed to just bringing your whole building up to meet what the zoning is, that they added a section in for urban frontage, or for frontages, that as long as you are making the situation better, and striving to meet that code, that you can add on.
Okay.
It's just that you can't go back further than the closest point to the street.
Right. So the front, is along Johnson then, right? No.
The front is along St.
The address.
Mary's.
The address
And
is.
then West Johnson goes along the short end of the addition. if that
Okay.
makes sense.
So is the non-compliant build-to distance from the dominant face of the addition, or the bay, the new bay distant from the new bay to the old secondary bay, or the dominant face
I believe it's the
to
dominant face.
okay. So that new bay doesn't really help you.
In our conversations with staff, I think the intent was that they were asking that the dominant face of the addition would be pushed forward to the face of the small bay on the existing building.
Okay.
And that, hence we're here.
And that area has got a 1-for-1 amenity added to it as part of this alternate?
I believe that area between the new addition and the parking area is amenity area.
And
That's
it's,
within the within the facade range.
and it covers it's a 1-for-1 area to what's not being said?
Yes.
Okay.
In terms of distance.
Yeah.
Essentially that delta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just seeing these stairs here in this picture. Is that not included in what's required to come back out?
Is that not included in the facade area? Is that what you're asking?
That's not amenity, right? So,
I don't believe so, but the amenity area does pop out a bit beyond.
even further than,
Yes.
What is the amenity area? It's just like a.
What is it?
Yeah, let's get to that.
We're just using, we've got some small seating area, we'll say. I don't know if it's, so the site has some fall to it. We're using some retaining walls there to just capture some flat space outside for outdoor seating for the office occupants.
So there are treatments that are beyond that wall.
Correct. And some of those are existing and some of those are new. We're aligning new elements at those amenity areas to align with existing site walls.
And those don't fall 20 feet into the ground or have HVAC units or anything like that.
That is correct.
Any questions for the applicant? Any more? Public comment? Yep. Name and address when you get there. Thank you.
I'm Sean Glidden. I live at 810 West Johnson, which is adjacent to this unit on West Johnson Street. The side yard of my property is adjacent to would be the back of this building. I believe that the matter here in front of the commission this evening is the front facade along St. Mary's. That's not what I wanted to address, so I wanted to get a few things on the record and have a chance to address them, either probably not in this forum, but in the appropriate forum.
Yeah.
The two issues that I would like to bring in front of the commission are on West Johnson Street. West Johnson is a small one-way street in Cameron Park neighborhood. The end of this new addition, I think it's going to come within 11 or 12 feet from the sidewalk, and it's almost 40 feet high. So you're going into an old established neighborhood, and you're going to have a 40-foot wall almost directly on the sidewalk. So I wanted to bring that in front of the commission. And also, it looks, from what I can tell on the schematics, which were really hard to see online, that there's going to be a retaining wall that's going to be, looks like it's going to be on my property or next to along my property line. And that haven't been addressed, or that hasn't been brought to my attention from the owner and the builder. And I want to, make sure that my trees and my landscape and anything that's affected can be dealt with properly. So I'm not opposed to the addition. It's the height of it right on Johnson that's questionable for me, and then the impact on my personal property and aesthetics.
I appreciate you. One thing I'll say, so it's not a 40-foot wall. It is a plane, but the majority of it appears to be glass. So from a transparency perspective, it'll be more than just a formidable concrete wall. But I understand your point. That's something that we see. It's really kind of a massing effect is what you're going after, which I get, which is contextual,
Yeah, I may not be using your lingo.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's kind of where you're going.
A glass. It's not my field of expertise.
Secondly, can we coordinate them before you start putting that wall so he's not losing any root systems that he doesn't necessarily need to do?
Yes, to be honest, we'll have to take a second look. I don't know that I can put my finger on anywhere we're doing any retaining right up against the site. That's not existing. Our existing retaining walls that have been there for decades along the back of this building that retain against the adjacent property. Don't recall any new on that accent front, but we're happy to look at it.
Yeah, I'd like to look at the plans in more detail, because like I said, they were really hard to blow up, and maybe we can come up with cleanups on that property line.
Yeah, just connect before you leave.
Great.
And get that. Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I mean, I believe it does show on the plan, it says 6.5-foot wall there on the plan, so.
If you're traveling.
It showed up in gray, which is what everything else is shown up as, so I could understand his
So
confusion.
is it showing a wall on the elevation?
It looks like it's an addition.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Ready to go to the findings? All right.
Yeah.
Over here. Back here somewhere. All right. The approved alternate meets the intent of the Bill 2 regulations, which I think we're all pretty familiar with. I think it does. 2, the approved alternate conforms with comp plan in the adopted city plans. UD 1.4.
UD 5.1.
Yep. The approved alternate does not substantially negatively alter the character defining street wall or establish a built-to pattern is not harmonious with existing built context. Certainly not on St. Mary's Street. I think we're far back enough on Johnson. 4, the change in percentage of building that occupies the built-to area setback does not negatively impact pedestrian access, comfort, safety. It does not. And 5, the site area that would have otherwise been occupied by buildings converted to outdoor amenity area. I'll give that to them.
Yeah, I think it won't stop our
Yeah.
moving through it, but maybe a little bit more detail when you submit, just so because we've seen some different options for that. And
Yeah, don't forget about that. Yeah, we declared as many areas. You expressed that it was, so just a little more detail. Good point. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second. Anybody?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Yep. And don't forget to get with him. All right, review portion over.
How much
time we have?
detail can we ask?
40.
We got 15 minutes.
We know what the